There's not much space when boarding here, but manageable. So Split is now behind us, as you can see, and we are now going full steam ahead. Small guard dog, Oscar. You're passing town Var. It's not uncommon to see a cruise ship like this one. And finally, we can see Vella in front of the ferry. Today I'm gonna take you on a ferry trip from Split to Vella on Korčula. The crossing with the ferry Bartol Karsic takes about 3.5 hours. For you to get an idea about the trip, I made a small map where you can see the ferry sails from Split towards island Brač and Šolta, and once we pass those islands we continue towards Var Island, and from there on to Vella. When you're sailing with a car ferry, Croatia, it's usually always the foot passenger who's allowed onto the ferry first, which means they would be able to pick the best seats in the passenger area. I'll explain you a bit later how you can benefit from that. We arrived at Split port 45 minutes before the departure time and lined up according to the instruction by the employees at the port. Time to board the ferry. Luckily our line was the first one they allowed on board, which means we will be first in line to get off the boat when we get to Vella. We bought our ticket online, so basically only thing I had to do was to show the employee of Jadrolinja a QR code on my phone, which he then scanned for us to get on the boat. There's not much space when boarding here, but manageable. And the employee guides us to the right lane. Worst part about these lanes, they are always so narrow, so it's tricky to open the doors once you are parked. But this time it seemed a bit easier than other ferry trips I've been doing this year. Cars parked, now we're on the passenger deck and trying to find our way to the passenger deck. As you can see, the ferry looks a bit older. It was built in 1989, commissioned by Jadrolinja, which has been operating this ferry since then. The ferry has a capacity of around 500 passengers and 54 cars. So now we are at the passenger level, and we will just have a look into the main cabin. As you can see to the left, there's a coffee bar and a kiosk, and here you have a lot of benches and tables, which is quite good if you bring some food or if you want to play games during the crossing. And while I took a walk around, my family managed to sneak in and find a good table for us, and also bring our small guard dog, Oscar. As a general rule, it's not allowed to bring a dog into the passenger area on the car ferries, but according to my own experience, I never had any problem bringing Oscar, which is a small dog, except for one time that was in the summer where the ferry was very full. They asked me to stay outside with him. While I'm walking around on the ferry here before it casts off, I will just explain you how you can secure yourself a seat on a full ferry in the cabin. And the way you do that is if you are more passengers traveling, you buy two tickets. One ticket is for the driver and the car, and then you buy another ticket for the remaining passengers, and the remaining passengers can then walk on board as foot passengers and secure a nice seat in the cabin. And doing so can be done regardless whether you buy the ticket online or you buy it at the port before sailing. "10:30 a.m. precisely. It's time to cast off, and we are basically on the way. I always love leaving Split Port because it's such a busy port. There's so much to look at when the ferry leaves or arrives, for that matter also. But when it arrives, you're usually down on the car deck, sitting in the car. So I always especially enjoy when you leave a port, because then you have time to have a look around. So Split is now behind us, as you can see, and we are now going full steam ahead. As I mentioned earlier, the ferry trip is about 3.5 hours, and we are gonna end up in Velaluga on the north end of Korčula. If you're going to Korčula, there's of course other options of traveling there. You can also drive by car down to the Pelješac Peninsula, and then take the car ferry, which is much shorter, from Ordovic to Dominci, which is close to Korčula town. So that's another option. If you're traveling without car, you of course have a foot passenger only fast ferry, which sails from Split to Korčula. That one takes about 2 hours, and that one operates year round. If you're coming from south, you can also take a fast ferry from Dubrovnik to Korčula. How much does it cost to go by ferry from Split to Velaluga? Well, we were 4 adults traveling by car, and we paid a total of €85. 51 or 52 euro was for the car, and the rest were for the passengers. If we would do the same trip in the main season, it would cost a bit more, I think in total around €110. As I mentioned earlier, you have an alternative way of getting to Korčula with car, that is basically driving down to Ordovic and then taking the ferry to Dominci on Korčula from there on. That ferry would set you back around 30-35 euro in the main season. And now that we are talking about prices for traveling with ferry to Korčula, I should also mention the prices for the foot passenger only, or the fast ferry, which goes from Split to Korčula town. The price for a ticket is €25, but there is one daily departure, which is a bit cheaper, I think about half the price. So check the schedules online, and then you would also be able to find the prices. And as you can see on the footage here, now we have reached the narrow street between Island Brač and Island Šolta. This is probably the most busy street in terms of sea traffic in Croatia. The distance between the two islands at this point is only 500 to 600 meters, so in theory, if you're a good swimmer, you could actually make it, but due to the sea traffic, it's definitely not recommended, and I also think somebody would be very angry at you if you would try to do this. But it is interesting that the two islands are this close, and also another interesting fact is, if you actually want to go from Island Šolta to Island Brač or the other way around, you don't have a ferry as far as I'm aware. You actually would have to take the ferry to Split and then go to the other island from there on. Hopefully this is something which will change in the future. After passing the narrow strait between Scholta and Brač. It's full steam ahead towards Island Hvar. And after 1 hour and 45 minutes of sailing, we basically reached the northwestern peak of Island Hvar, and we now turn into the strait where we sail between Island Hvar and the Pakleni Islands. The Pakleni Islands is 16 small islands located opposite to Hvar, and they stretch from the peak of Hvar till town of Hvar. And if you should visit the town of Hvar, it's a very popular thing to take a small boat to go out on the beach on the Pakleni Island. When you're passing town Hvar, it's not uncommon to see a cruise ship like this one anchored up in front of the town, because Hvar is of course one of the most popular holiday destinations you would find in Croatia, so it's very well visited. Most people come to Hvar taking the fast ferry from Split, which is in most cases a closed vessel, so you don't really see the arrival at town Hvar that good when you're sitting inside a cabin. But when you're traveling on the car ferry like we are doing here, you can really enjoy the view on town Hvar when you are passing by. And you say goodbye to Hvar town when you pass the lighthouse you see here in front of us. This is one of many lighthouses around Croatia. Lots of them today are not in use, but they are not in use for the original purpose, but are basically turned into accommodation which you can rent. So if you are looking to stay in a remote place and very private place, you should look for lighthouses in Croatia. After roughly 2 hours and 45 minutes of sailing, we reached the peak of Island Korčula and started entering the bay of Vela Luka. And as you can see, the weather improved compared to when we left Split, so people came outside and enjoyed the views. And finally, we can see Vela Luka in front of the ferry, and it is of course lowering the speed all the time as we get closer and closer to the city. As you can see here, now we are really close to the city. You have houses built all the way down to the water, and the speed of the ferry is now very limited, as the ferry has to turn to dock at the new port in Vela Luka. And now, as you can see, we are almost at the dock in Vela Luka, and it's time for me to head down to the car so that I can drive it off the ferry. I hope you enjoyed this video about the ferry trip from Split to Vela Luka. Please give the video a like or subscribe to our channel if you want to see more videos from traveling around in Croatia and the region. Thank you very much for watching. Until the next one.